I don't know if it's still part of YouTube culture, but back in 2015, everyone wanted to be the first comment on a new video. There was a song written about it that sort of poked fun at this idea, saying, you could have said something a little bit more intelligent, but no, you typed first. You and 63 other people. In most instances, being first is something that is special and sought after, whether it's the first comment on a new video, where everyone gets to see you and what you said, or the first person to board an airplane and spend all that extra time in the stale air, or the firstborn getting to enjoy everything first. If you are familiar with the Bible, you may see where this is going. In many cultures, it is the firstborn son who inherits the family business or responsibility. Yesterday, we saw God break this pattern of leadership and honor going to the firstborn. Jacob, the secondborn son, received the blessing of the firstborn. And today, that pattern continues. Hebrews 11 verse 21 picks up this theme from the Old Testament, albeit in a super subtle way. This verse reads, "By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff." Now, you need to know a bit about Joseph's sons to understand the connection, although now that I've said that, you probably can guess. Joseph's two sons are Manasseh, the firstborn, and Ephraim, number 2. And at the end of his life, Jacob had his son Joseph bring these two boys to be blessed. Now, if you remember, Jacob was a bit of a mischievous scoundrel who had a lot of family drama. Instead of doing the culturally expected thing of blessing the oldest son first, he switched things up, and Jacob blessed Ephraim, the younger, first. Now, I'm tempted to see this as Jacob just adding to the family drama, as I sort of set it up, but the author of Hebrews calls his disruption an act of faith. God's plan seems strange and took Joseph by surprise, just read Genesis 48, but Jacob had seen God's pattern and sought to live accordingly. And I think that's a big point of this Hall of Faith passage we've been looking at. By telling us about these men and women of the faith, Hebrews 11 shows us God's pattern. God makes promises, assuring us of a great destination. And then God walks with us, showing us His plan, His route, and His pattern, and inviting us to live by faith. God's plan is not always what we would expect, though. God chooses a plan that goes against, sometimes, what we would assume to be normal or natural. With Jacob and Joseph's sons, we see the pattern of God choosing what looks like the weaker or the second choice. And if you think about it, this is a pattern that goes all the way back to Cain and Abel. God's plan for His people isn't the honor and glory of getting to be first. That honor is reserved for someone else. Instead, God calls the second, and He shows His deep love and care for these children. And if you think about it, that's a pretty amazing thing. God does love and delight in His Son, and He calls us sons. Throughout this list of faithful people, we see God's love and care. He's inviting the faithful to receive His true blessing as a co-heir with His Son. Jesus, as the ultimate fulfillment of God's promise and the very Son of God Himself, gives us His blessing. Seeing this, we should join Jacob in worshiping. So how are you approaching God this Advent season? As a season of longing and waiting, it's really easy to be impatient and annoyed, and we may have resentment or wariness about God's motives. Jacob and Joseph's sons call us to remember the gospel truth that God does love us as true sons, and we can trust in Him with our future. It's not easy, but it brings ultimately the best joy. As one commentator describes it, to believe God's word and base everything in the future upon His word is worship. So ask God for help worshiping Him this Advent season.